Do you believe there's a city on this planet where the ground never thaws? Where the air is so cold it can crack steel, shatter rubber, and freeze your breath before it even leaves your mouth? A place where winter doesn't last a few months. It lasts most of the year. Where the sun disappears for weeks at a time, and the darkness becomes something you either learn to live with or it breaks you completely. And yet, more than 300 people call this place home. Not because they have no other choice, not because they're trapped, but because something about this frozen world holds them. Something in the ice, in the silence, in the way life moves here. Slower, heavier, more deliberate, keeps pulling them back. Today, we're going to Yakutsk, the coldest permanently inhabited city on Earth, a place where temperatures have plunged to minus 71 degrees Celsius, where survival isn't a metaphor, it's a daily routine. And the question that stays with you long after you leave isn't, how cold is it? You already know the answer. The real question is far simpler and far harder to answer. Why do they stay? To find that answer, you don't start with history books or temperature charts. You start at the open-air market, because nothing tells you more about a place than what its people eat and how they get it. Yakutsk's winter markets are unlike anything most people have ever seen. There are no refrigerators here. There's no need for them. The air itself is the freezer. Vendors stand behind wooden stalls in minus 50 degrees Celsius weather, surrounded by fish so completely frozen they look like glass sculptures. Not wrapped, not packaged, just stacked like lumber, rigid and pale, catching the weak winter light. Customers don't browse the way you might in a supermarket. They move fast. Every second of exposed skin matters. They point, they pay, they go. The fish, mostly river species like amel, whitefish, and nelma, are often eaten raw, sliced thin with a knife while still frozen solid. The locals call it stroganina. It melts on the tongue. Cold first, then rich, then gone. For many here, it's not a delicacy. It's just dinner. Nearby, horse meat is sold in thick, dark slabs, split apart with axes when necessary. Not with knives. Axes. Because the cold makes the meat not just frozen, it makes it stone. The sound when it's struck echoes across the market like a crack of ice on a river. There are almost no vegetables, not because people don't want them, but because growing them here is nearly impossible. And importing fresh produce in winter is expensive enough that most families simply don't bother. What vegetables exist are preserved, pickled, fermented, sealed away against the cold months ahead. This is not a world built around comfort. It's built around endurance, and the food is only the beginning. Walk through Yakutsk streets in January, and the first thing you notice, even before the cold hits you, is the buildings. They float, not literally, of course, but they appear to. Massive concrete pillars rise from the ground, and the structures sit on top of them like ships balanced on stilts, hovering several feet above the earth. This isn't an architectural style, it's a survival strategy. Beneath Yakutsk lies permafrost, permanently frozen ground that stretches down hundreds of meters in some places. It has been frozen for thousands of years. But it's not completely stable. If heat from a building transfers into the ground, the top layer begins to thaw. And when permafrost thaws, it doesn't just soften, it collapses, it shifts, it pulls entire structures down with it, slowly at first, then suddenly. Early buildings here, constructed directly on the ground, began sinking within decades. Walls cracked, floors buckled. Entire apartment blocks had to be abandoned. The city learned its lesson the hard way. Now, every major building is elevated. The cold air circulates freely beneath the structure, keeping the permafrost frozen, keeping the ground stable, keeping the city standing. It's one of the most counterintuitive things about Yakutsk, a city that survives not by fighting the cold, but by using it, by letting it circulate, by making the freeze part of the architecture itself. And it works. Walk down the central streets today, and the buildings look almost ordinary from a distance. Blocky, Soviet-era concrete, newer glass facades, utility poles strung with thick cables. Normal, in a way. Until you crouch down and see the dark gap between the ground and the floor, the cold air moving through it like a slow exhale. The city is breathing, and it's the cold doing the breathing. Now consider the cars. In most cities, people start their cars in the morning and drive to work. In Yakutsk, many people never turn their cars off at all. Not in winter, not for weeks, sometimes not for months, because at -50 degrees Celsius, engine oil doesn't flow. It thickens to something closer to paste. Metal contracts, seals crack, batteries fail instantly. If you turn off your car in serious cold and leave it overnight, there's a real chance it simply won't start again. And in a city where temperatures can kill exposed skin in minutes, a car that won't start isn't just an inconvenience, it's a crisis. So the engines run, day and night. Parked outside apartment buildings, outside shops, outside schools, the sound of idling engines becomes part of the city's ambient noise. A low, constant hum underneath everything else. A reminder that the cold is always there, always pressing, always waiting. There are also special engine heaters installed in many vehicles, electrical systems that keep the engine block warm through the night. Garages here aren't just convenient, they're valuable, rented out at premium prices during the coldest months. And it's not just cars. Pipes are wrapped in thick insulation and heated electrically to prevent freezing. Fuel lines run above ground rather than underground in many areas because digging through permafrost is both difficult and expensive. Infrastructure here costs more to build, more to maintain, and more to protect. And still, sometimes it fails. Water mains burst. Heating systems break down in the middle of the coldest nights. When that happens, emergency crews work in temperatures that most people wouldn't stand in for 5 minutes, trying to restore warmth to apartments full of families huddled under everything they own. This is what survival looks like when it's not a dramatic moment. When it's just Tuesday, you might wonder what draws people here in the first place. And the honest answer is, for most, it wasn't a choice they made. It was a choice made for them, or made by their ancestors. Yakutsk was founded in 1632 by Russian Cossack explorers pushing east across Siberia. For centuries, it was a remote outpost, a waypoint for expeditions, a place where exile and ambition met in equal measure. Political prisoners were sent here. Trappers came for furs. Missionaries followed. Scientists arrived to study the permafrost and the cold. The indigenous Yakut people, the Sakha, had been here far longer, adapting over generations to conditions that would destroy most cultures. They developed their own language, their own spiritual traditions, their own foods and clothing and ways of reading the sky. They are still here, still distinct, still proud of a culture built not despite the cold, but because of it. During the Soviet era, Yakutsk grew rapidly. Industries were established. Apartment blocks went up. The city became a regional hub for mining, for logistics, for the administration of one of the largest and most sparsely populated regions on Earth. The Republic of Sakha, of which Yakutsk is the capital, is roughly the size of India. It contains enormous reserves of diamonds, gold, coal, and natural gas. The wealth is in the ground, frozen alongside everything else, waiting. People came for work. They stayed because their children were born here. Their parents were buried here. The city became theirs. And now it's home to over 300,000 people who have built something remarkable. A functioning, complicated, warm on the inside city on top of the most hostile ground on Earth. But let's talk about what -71 degrees Celsius actually feels like, because numbers stop meaning much past a certain point. The record low recorded in the Yakutia region, -71.2 degrees Celsius, was measured in the village of Oymyakon, a few hundred kilometers from Yakutsk. That's minus 96 degrees Fahrenheit. At that temperature, the distinction between cold and pain disappears entirely. It's simply damage. Exposed skin begins to freeze within seconds. Breathing becomes difficult because the moisture in your lungs begins to crystallize. Metal sticks to bare hands. Plastic shatters like glass. In Yakutsk itself, winters regularly reach minus 50 degrees Celsius to minus 60 degrees Celsius. Schools here don't close for snow days. They close for temperature. When it drops below minus 52 degrees Celsius, primary school students are allowed to stay home. Below minus 56 degrees Celsius, and older students get the same privilege. Think about that scale for a moment. In most of the world, anything below minus 15 degrees Celsius causes disruption. Schools close, flights get canceled, cities grind to a halt. In Yakutsk, minus 15 degrees Celsius is almost comfortable. Children play outside at minus 30 degrees Celsius. Markets stay open at minus 45 degrees Celsius. Life simply continues. It continues because people have adapted in the way they dress, the way they move, the way they schedule their days. Traditional Sakha clothing, made from reindeer fur and layered in specific ways, can keep a person warm at temperatures that would be lethal in anything else. Modern residents combine traditional approaches with industrial-grade gear. Insulated everything, layers so thick that movement becomes deliberate, faces often covered to the eyes. Eyelashes freeze. Breath forms immediate clouds. The air makes a faint crackling sound that locals call the whispering of the stars, the sound of moisture in the air crystallizing as you breathe. It is, by any external measure, one of the most hostile environments on the planet for human life. And it is full of people living quietly, stubbornly, completely. There's a detail that visitors notice quickly once they've gotten past the initial shock of the cold. The people here laugh a lot. Not nervously, not bitterly, just easily. The humor is dry, matter-of-fact, deeply tied to the conditions. There are jokes about tourists whose cameras stop working after 30 seconds outside. Jokes about fingers that had to be retrieved from jacket pockets where they'd been shoved too fast to avoid frostbite. Jokes about cars that died on the way to work. About heating pipes that chose the worst possible night to fail. The humor is a language within a language. It communicates something that can't easily be translated. We know this is extreme. We know you think we're insane for being here. And we're fine with that. Because from the inside, life here doesn't feel like survival. It feels like life. There are restaurants with menus that blend Sakha tradition with modern technique. Reindeer, carpaccio, frozen fish served in ways that a fine dining chef in Paris might recognize. There are theaters, universities, a thriving art scene. There's a permafrost museum where you can walk into tunnels carved directly into the frozen earth and see mammoth bones preserved for tens of thousands of years in the natural deep freeze of the ground. There are families in warm apartments watching the same television shows as families anywhere else. Children complaining about homework. Couples arguing about where to eat. Ordinary life, compressed and intensified by geography, but ordinary life nonetheless. And perhaps that's what's hardest to explain to someone who's never been here. You expect a frontier. You expect hardship on every face and survival on every corner. And it's there. But underneath it is something else. A texture to daily life that comes from knowing your environment intimately, from having adapted to it rather than escaped it. Yakutsk doesn't feel like a city at the end of the world. It feels like a city that decided the end of the world was a good place to start. There is a festival held here every year in the middle of winter, not despite the cold, because of it. The Pole of Cold Festival draws visitors from across Russia and increasingly from abroad. There are ice sculptures, dog sled races, reindeer competitions, traditional games played in temperatures that most cameras can't tolerate. Performers dressed in full traditional Sakha costume move through clouds of their own breath, and the audience, bundled so thoroughly that only eyes are visible, watches and cheers. It's a deliberate act of celebration, a declaration that this cold, this extreme, this punishing winter, it belongs to us. We are not enduring it. We are hosting it. The Sakha people have a concept called the Isyach, a summer festival celebrating the return of warmth, of light, of the sun after the long darkness. It involves fermented mare's milk, called kumis, traditional dances, and a fire ceremony at dawn. Tens of thousands gather on the plains outside the city. It is joyful and ancient and entirely alive. And the contrast between Isyach and the winter festivals tells you something important about life here. It is not a life defined only by what you endure. It is defined by what you celebrate. Both the cold and the warmth. Both the darkness and the light. They are not opposites here. They are the same rhythm, the same pulse of the same place. The light, or rather its absence, deserves its own attention. In December, Yakutsk receives barely 3 hours of sunlight per day. Not 3 hours of weak light, 3 hours where the sun actually climbs above the horizon. The rest is either full darkness or a long blue twilight that never quite becomes day. For weeks at a time in deep winter, the sun sets in early afternoon. By 3 o'clock, it's night. By 3 in the morning, it's still night. The darkness stretches in every direction and presses down on the city like a weight. For newcomers, this is often harder than the cold. Cold you can dress for. Cold has gear, has solutions, has specific practical countermeasures. Darkness is different. Darkness gets inside. It affects sleep, mood, energy. Seasonal depression is real and significant in communities this far north. But here again, the culture has built responses over generations. Interior spaces are warm and brightly lit. Social gatherings are frequent. The long, dark evenings are filled with storytelling, music, food shared among neighbors. The Sakha tradition of oral literature is not a relic. It is still practiced, still passed between generations, still a way of filling the dark hours with meaning. There is also this: when the sun does return, nobody takes it for granted. A day in late January when the light stretches to 4 hours is not just an astronomical fact. It's an event. People go outside specifically to stand in it, to feel it on their faces, to remember what it does to the landscape, how it catches the ice crystals in the snow and turns the whole world briefly, blindingly, brilliantly gold. You cannot overstate what warmth and light mean to someone who has been without them. It's not background anymore. It's a gift. And gifts are noticed. The diamonds beneath this frozen ground are worth pausing on. The Yakutia region produces roughly a quarter of the world's rough diamonds. The Mir mine, one of the largest open-pit diamond mines ever created, left a hole in the earth so vast that it generated its own air currents. Helicopters were banned from flying over it because the downward draft was strong enough to pull them in. The mine has since been closed, flooded, and converted to an underground operation. But the scale of what was extracted here over decades is staggering. Billions of dollars in diamonds, pulled from the permafrost, cleaned, sorted, and shipped to cutting facilities and markets and jewelry stores around the world. The wealth generated by those diamonds, along with gold, coal, and natural gas, has funded the infrastructure that makes Yakutsk function. It's also created the peculiar situation common to many resource-rich remote regions: prosperity that is abstract, concentrated, and often invisible to ordinary residents while the ground beneath them holds fortunes. Not every person in Yakutsk benefits equally from what's underground. The cost of living is high. Food is expensive. Heating costs are enormous, and imported goods carry heavy premiums. Salaries in many industries are higher than Russian averages, a compensation for the conditions. But those higher wages disappear quickly against the higher costs. The balance is precarious. And like every resource economy, there's an underlying anxiety about what happens when the ground gives up what it has and there's nothing left to extract. For now, the city works. The diamonds come up. The people stay. The engines keep running through the night. Climate change is doing something strange to Yakutsk. The permafrost that the entire city sits on is warming, slowly, fractions of a degree each year, but enough to make engineers nervous. Buildings that were stable for decades are showing new cracks. Roads in some areas are developing sinkholes as the ground beneath them softens. Infrastructure designed for permanently frozen Earth is encountering ground that is, increasingly, only mostly frozen. The irony is sharp. One of the coldest cities on Earth is warming, and the warming creates problems that the cold never did. The cold was consistent, predictable, something you could engineer around. Warming permafrost is none of those things. It's uneven, unpredictable, and gets worse in precisely the ways that matter most for a city built on top of it. Researchers from around the world come to Yakutsk to study this. The Permafrost Institute here, one of the oldest and most respected in the world, has been monitoring the ground for decades. They have data going back further than almost any comparable facility. And the data tells a story that is difficult to ignore. The locals are aware of it. They've watched the changes. An elder Sakha woman interviewed by researchers some years ago described seeing the riverbanks where she played as a child now collapsing into the water, the permafrost thawing and slumping where it had been solid all her life. She didn't describe it with alarm. She described it with the quiet sorrow of someone watching something irreplaceable disappear. But even in the face of that, there is no mass exodus, no collapse of the city's sense of itself. People adapt, as they always have. Buildings are reinforced. Engineering solutions are developed. Life continues, because it has always continued here, through worse than this, and the instinct is to find a way rather than leave. There are things about Yakutsk that visitors never see in photographs. The steam. On the coldest days, every source of warmth, every vent, every exhaust pipe, every person breathing on the street becomes a pillar of vapor. The city smokes at -50 degrees Celsius. Apartment buildings trail long streamers of steam from their heating outlets. The power station on the edge of town produces enormous clouds that roll slowly across the city and catch the low winter light. From a hill above Yakutsk on a still day in January, the entire city appears to be on fire. The silence. There's a particular kind of quiet in extreme cold that has no real equivalent in warmer climates. Cold air is dense. Dense air doesn't carry sound as easily. Footsteps in packed snow make almost no noise. Wind, when it's absent, leaves a silence so complete it feels like pressure. And in that silence, on a clear night, you can sometimes hear the aurora, a faint crackling that scientists debate whether it's real or imagined, but that many people here will tell you they've heard. The colors. Winter in Yakutsk is not all white. The sky at twilight is the most extraordinary blue, deep, almost violet, lasting for an hour before true dark. Ice on the river takes colors you don't expect. Turquoise where it's deep and clear, gray where sediment lies beneath, gold where the last horizontal light catches the surface. Snow on open ground changes from white to pink to purple in the space of 20 minutes around sunset. It is, by any measure, a beautiful place. Harsh and beautiful and specific in the way that extreme places are specific, shaped so thoroughly by one overwhelming condition that everything about it becomes distinctive. You could not confuse Yakutsk with anywhere else on Earth. It looks like itself and nothing else. So why do they stay? By now, the answer should feel less surprising than it did at the beginning. They stay because they are from here. Because their grandparents' names are in the local cemetery and their children's drawings are on the refrigerator. Because they know where the good fishing is and which roads to avoid in a whiteout and exactly how many layers to wear at exactly which temperature. They stay because the city, improbable as it is, works. It provides education, medicine, culture, community, economy. It provides what every city promises to provide: a place where life is possible, where a future can be built, where belonging is earned through shared endurance. They stay because the cold, as brutal as it is theirs. It is the condition under which their identity was formed and continues to be formed. The Sakha don't describe themselves as people who survive the cold. They describe themselves as people of the cold. It is not what they endure. It is who they are. And maybe, just maybe, there's something in this that speaks to something universal. We talk constantly about quality of life. We rank cities by average temperature, by commute times, by cost of living, by access to culture and amenities. And by almost every conventional measure, Yakutsk would rank poorly. The cold is punishing. The darkness is real. The costs are high. But the people who live here, on the whole, do not describe themselves as living diminished lives. They describe a life that is difficult and beautiful and specific and theirs. A life where the challenge is not incidental but central, where enduring it, understanding it, celebrating it, gives life, texture, and meaning. There is a Sakha proverb that has no perfect translation, but carries the meaning roughly. The one who knows how to keep warm does not complain about the cold. It's not about denial. It's about mastery. It's about the difference between someone fighting a place and someone belonging to it. Every winter, the Lena River, vast, slow, deeply cold, freezes solid enough to drive trucks across. This is not metaphor. 18-wheel trucks cross this river on ice roads, carrying supplies to settlements further north. The ice is measured and monitored. There are speed limits on the ice road because going too fast creates resonance waves in the ice that can crack it. There are rules about spacing between vehicles for the same reason. This is the technology of extreme cold: practical, precise, unglamorous, and extraordinary. And when the river thaws in spring, those roads disappear in days. The same river that carried trucks becomes impassable within a week. The ice breaks apart in massive grinding slabs that pile up on the banks like the ruins of something enormous. The sound, locals say you can hear the river breaking up from kilometers away, is like a slow, sustained explosion. And then summer comes. It comes fast in Yakutsk. The transition is not gradual. One week the world is frozen, the next the ground is thawing, and the sun is up for 20 hours a day, and temperatures climb to plus 35 degrees C. The same city that was at minus 50 degrees Celsius 6 months earlier is now warmer than Paris in July. Mosquitoes emerge in terrifying numbers from the thawing ground. The sun barely sets. The whole city seems to shake itself awake after the long winter, and people pour outdoors as if reclaiming space that was taken from them for months. The summer is short, 8, maybe 10 weeks of real warmth, but it is gloriously, extravagantly itself. Gardens somehow bloom. Children play outside past midnight in daylight. Ice cream shops do extraordinary business. The river fills with swimmers, and then the cold returns, and the cycle continues. It has continued for thousands of years. It will continue after everyone alive today is gone. The cold and the warmth, the dark and the light, the frozen and the flowing. This is the rhythm of Yakutsk, written into the ground, carved into the culture, lived by the people. There's a moment that many visitors describe, usually on their last day, usually while standing somewhere unremarkable, a street corner or a market stall or a spot by the river, when something shifts. They came expecting an extreme. They found one. They expected a place defined entirely by endurance, by hardship, by the constant management of a hostile environment. What they didn't expect was to find a city that feels, in some quiet but insistent way, more alive than many places they've been before. Not louder, not faster, not more spectacular, just more present, more deliberate, as if the cold has stripped away everything that doesn't matter and left only what does. Warmth, community, the work of the day, the meal at the end of it, the people around the table. Yakutsk doesn't ask you to want to live there. It doesn't try to convince you. It simply exists, improbably, powerfully, deeply itself, on the frozen ground at the edge of the world. And when you leave, the question follows you. Not, how do they survive? You know the answer to that. They survive the way humans always survive extreme conditions, through knowledge, through community, through adapting rather than fleeing. The question that follows you is different. What are we leaving behind in the rush to avoid difficulty? In a world that keeps getting more convenient, more climate-controlled, more insulated from extremes, there might be something we're optimizing away. Something about texture, about meaning, about the particular kind of strength that only comes from living in a place that demands everything you have. Yakutsk gives you no choice but to be present. The cold requires it. The darkness demands it. The community depends on it. And maybe in that demanding, impossible, beautiful place, there's a lesson worth carrying back, wherever home might be. If this journey to the coldest city on Earth left you wanting more of the places the world forgets to talk about, more of the stories hidden inside extreme landscapes and extraordinary communities, then you're in the right place. Hit subscribe and stay with us. There's a lot more world left to uncover. And if you know someone who thinks they've seen everything, share this with them. The cold will take care of the rest.